shop.
It's that time again. Welcome back. I know we had a little bit of a hiccup there and missed a few weeks of what's in the shop, but let's dive straight back into where we should be, which is talking about music. Today, I want to focus on some of these little guys, CDs. Remember them? We're always talking about records, so let's give a little love to the little guy here. In particular, I want to look at some of my favorite releases that came out in 1985. And we're going to start with one of my fave bands of the 80s, The Church. This is their third or fourth LP, depending on where you live. This is Heyday. And this is the record that pretty much put The Church on the map. This is the first time The Church were ever on the cover of one of their albums. And it was actually done as a joke. They were kind of making fun of the whole psychedelic scene and whatever. As you can see, Persian rug, paisley shirts. You got to keep in mind at this point in the 80s, there was kind of this neo-psychedelic movement and lots of paisley shirts around. We'll get to that in a few minutes. But this is the first time The Church was actually on one of their albums. And it was supposedly done as a joke, but it may have worked because it may have been these bright colors and all this movement and vibrancy, I should say, that made people pay attention. But there was definitely vibrancy because of the producer they got for this record. And that was Peter Walsh. Before the band recorded this record, they were really into Simple Minds' the Simple Minds album, New Gold Dream. And they wanted the same producer to maybe work some magic for them. So they got hold of Peter Walsh, and he did. Another key factor, which maybe puts a little more muscle and vibrancy, well, not maybe, but for sure, puts a different musical direction and a different spin on this, is the fact that this is the first time that the whole band worked as a unit to write and record the album, rather than just old Steve here. Marty and Peter got to get involved as well and write, and it really shows. As I said, they had 4 singles off this. Got moderate success here in the US. It kind of set the stage for them, got on MTV and all that. And guess what? After touring and getting on TV and finally started to break, Warner Brothers dropped them. What the heck? But hey, we all know what happens with the next album, don't we? Anyway, if you don't know The Church, you want to check this out. Fantastic album. The first great, can I say that? Church album, Heyday. Fantastic. Remember I told you about psychedelia and this, that, and the other, and paisley shirts going on? Kind of ties in with this next band. This was their first album. I'm talking about Love and Rockets' Seventh Dream of Teenage Heaven. Funny thing about this, the band broke because they released a standalone single, which was a cover version of the Temptations' Ball of Confusion. And I believe it actually put the band in the dance charts, believe it or not. What's weird about that, as you may or may not know, Love and Rockets were 3/4 of Bauhaus. And Bauhaus got their start based on a reggae riff. I think that's really strange that such a revered goth group and the neo-psychedelic spin-off of the same band both got their starts with like soul music and reggae music. But anyway, on to Love and Rockets. They had 2 singles off this album, Ball of Confusion and If There's a Heaven Above. And a lot of people were really interested in this album because they felt the band were really pushing a new direction and really, well, how do you want to say, showing all their colors, if you will. And they were. They were kind of rocky, very much kind of psychedelic-y. In fact, some critics were using terms like Donovan, dropping his name, Syd Barrett era Pink Floyd, and some other bands in regards to describing the way this new music sound. And a lot of people thought that Love and Rockets were able to spread their wings, so to speak, because they had finally gotten rid of the very affected Peter Murphy. Anyway, it's interesting to note too that before the band actually released the album, all the members were already releasing music before Bauhaus ever broke up. I mean, Daniel Ash was already working on Tones on Tail in the early 80s, David J. doing the same, and after Bauhaus broke up, Peter Murphy went on to do Dolly's Car. So the remaining 3 members reconvened and said, you know what, I think we're a strong enough unit to where we can really do something. And they did. And you know, all music said this was one of the most deceptive debuts of the 80s. Why? Because maybe you're thinking it's supposed to be goth, but it turns out to be very colorful, psychedelic, and take you on all these crazy journeys. And it was a great debut. They also went on to say that this album is as a profound experience as any of the lauded trips of the original psychedelic era. The Quietest Music website also claimed that Love and Rockets were one of the key acts to bring psychedelia back into rock and roll. Another band that kind of blended that, and another great album of 1985, and my favorite album by this band, is The Cult with their second album, Love. You gotta own this record, and you gotta own every single that came off this record. There was only 3, so it's easy enough to do. Again, second record by The Cult, and this record really broke because of the single She Sells Sanctuary, and everybody knows that song. In fact, it's kind of funny, She Sells Sanctuary was on the US charts for 36 weeks, and it actually got into the Billboard dance charts. Can you believe it? The Cult actually had a single in the dance charts. But anyway, this really set the stage for the band and broke the band. Again, there are 2 key factors why this album is so great and why it really helped propel the Cult into, well, pretty much getting into world stardom and world renowned fame. And that is 2 things. A guy named Steve and a guy named Mark. Steve Brown was a producer who'd worked with Wham and ABC and would go on to work with Manic Street Preachers, and he was very big in pop music. And he was doing great, having a lot of hits, but he said, you know, I want to produce music that you can turn up loud, listen to loud, and rock out to. This was a perfect project for him because Steve helped encourage the band to really push themselves and try things they weren't trying and just be a little different with what they were handling and doing. The other factor was Mark, and I'm going to try to say his name, Mark Brzezinski. If you know how to say it, you tell me. Anyway, he was the drummer from Big Country and was still in Big Country when he was hired in to drum for the album sessions for The Cult. And if you listen to some Big Country and listen to The Cult, it's obvious that his fingers were in both pies. But anyway, Billy Duffy had said that Mark was a big inspiration too and just brought a lot of new ideas and a lot of new energy in to The Cult. And it really made a difference. A few little things that you may want to know. The beginning of A Sanctuary, where it kind of has that noisy stuff, came about by accident, kind of like the Church's album cover. All of a sudden they got big and it was done as a joke, kind of a happy accident. And the thing was, Billy Duffy and Ian Astbury were in the studio just clowning around. Duffy saw a violin bow and said, man, I'm going to get it and ham it up and try to make Ian have a laugh. So he punched all his effects pedals, bing, 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 tried to do his best Jimmy Page. Steve Brown walks in, what is that racket? It sounds great. That was the intro for the song. They re-edited the song, put all the noise on. Boom, history is made. Biggest charting single. Everybody knows that song. Fantastic. It's also interesting to note my favorite tune off of here and the title of the album, Love and The Phoenix, were the last 2 songs that they did right before they went in to record the album. And they decided that these 2 songs, by strategically realizing how great they were, put them on the album, pulled some of the other songs off, and put them on B-sides, changed the whole album, the direction of this, made it an instant classic and a fantastic LP. Another thing about Sanctuary, because it was already in the charts before the band went in the studio to record Love, it put extra pressure on them. They didn't want to be one-hit wonders, so they worked really hard to make a solid album, which they did, but also worked really hard on their follow-up single to really capitalize on the chart success, and that was Rain. And again, they did a fantastic job on that. By the way, the working title for that song, Rain, when they were working on it, was actually called White Wedding. If you don't know The Cult, you need this. Very heavy, very great, and lots of wah-wah pedal. For 1985, that's crazy. Going on to my next band. Got another couple first here. We're talking about New Order. This was actually their 3rd album, but it was the first album that was on a major US release schedule and promotion plan and whatever. And funnily enough, it was released on Quincy Jones's Quest or Q West, however you want to say it, record label. Imagine that. A jazz soul guy with the likes of George Benson and Patty Austin on his record label signing New Order. I'm going to say that was probably the first British act he had signed to his label. But anyway, a couple first about this record. It was the first time, I think, and a lot of critics, that New Order finally got it right. Melding electronics with rock and roll instruments, perfect blend, solid record. First great New Order record? Could be. But it was the first time that the band actually appeared on the cover. Another first about this, it was the first time that New Order would release a debut, or how we say, a lead-off single simultaneously the same day they released the album. And that single was The Perfect Kiss. Remember, prior to this, New Order were releasing standalone singles like Blue Monday. It was not on Power, Corruption, and Lies. Thieves Like Us, Confusion. Those singles were not on any album. But they decided to release the next single, The Perfect Kiss, same day they released this. So another first for New Order. This album was also considered one of the 100 greatest British albums ever by, I believe it was Q Magazine, and it's also included in 1001 Albums You Must Hear Before You Die. And it is just a great record. Oh, one other thing. It also has the first song that Bernard said he wanted to, or one of the first, I should say. One of the first songs that Bernard wrote as a song where he wanted to tell a story rather than write music and then put lyrics to the music. And that story is Love Vigilantes, which is one of my favorite songs. He called it a redneck song because, well, it's just about a guy who goes off to war, comes back home to find his beloved dead on the floor from suicide because she had gotten a telegram that he was dead. Whew! Heavy duty. Great song though. Melody Maker though panned that song, just thought it was horrible. But they did go on to say that this was the most articulate sound since the Cocteau Twins' Treasure LP, elevating depression to ecstasy. Fantastic. And my last one, we all know, U2, The Unforgettable Fire. Few funny things about this. The album got into the US top 40 to the same position as the prior album, War, actually, number 12, I think it was. But after War, the band wanted to change their sound and they had some new ideas they wanted to try out. And they thought it was too Euro for an American producer. So they wanted to go with Brian Eno because they felt they could help him blossom and really guide the sound and ideas they wanted to do. So they went to Blackwell, Chris Blackwell, the label head of Island Records, and told him, and Blackwell said, absolutely not, do not go with Eno, because he was afraid, quote unquote, that he would bury them with avant-garde nonsense. The band persevered and pushed for Eno. They got Eno to commit to come check him out, but Eno didn't want to produce him. So he brought along his buddy, Daniel Lanois. Why? Because Eno had a plan of going out the back door and leaving the band with Lanois because he didn't want to be involved. Whoa! What just happened? Technical difficulties. The phone fell. Everybody's good. Excellent. Anyway, Eno was going to leave and leave Lanois with the band. Well, guess what? It all worked out. It really set the stage for U2's new sound and movement. Got them their biggest single ever. Well, to that point, I should say, which was Pride in the Name of Love. And we also have to remember in 1985 was Live Aid. And it was a very key moment for U2 when they were there. And Rolling Stone had said that after Live Aid, U2 was the most important band of the 80s and maybe the most important band ever. I don't know about that, but it did help propel this album just into the stratosphere. First really, really great U2 album. This and the next album, Joshua Tree, everybody needs. Solid. Eno did a good job. U2, Mr. Lanois. But it is funny because not everybody thought so. Kurt Loder, who was on MTV News at a later date, but he was originally with Rolling Stone, had this to say. He wasn't very pleased about this here album, and this is what Mr. Loader said. U2 flickers and nearly fades, its fire banked by a misconceived production strategy and occasional interludes of soggy, songless self-indulgence. This is not a bad album, but neither is it the irrefutable beauty that the band's fans anticipated. I think Mr. Loader went on to eat those words, and we all know what happens with this album. Boom, superstardom. U2 would never look back. Great choice with Eno and Lanois. And hey, I gotta wrap it up. Kind of gone on too long this time, but thank you for joining me again. Thank you every time you come here and spend time with me. If you have any tips, ideas, or just want to say hi, you know you can always write here on Instagram, or you can write me a regular email at noisyrecordsmx@hotmail.com. If you're in town this weekend, come by. Got lots more new stuff, always getting new stuff. Actually, it's incredible the amount of new stuff we've been getting in. So please, if you think of something you want, you can always write a letter. If you're in Mexico and you're looking for a certain record, and let me see if I can help you with that. Again, come by the shop this weekend. If you're in town, would love to see you. Come by and say hi. Everybody take care. Keep on rocking.